On this week's Bet the Process podcast, Rufus and I have a new guest on. Instead of Jordan, who normally comes on for Sweet 16, we have Gav, a guy we met on Twitter. Sounds a little sketchy, but he's pretty interesting. He knows a lot of teams and names, which Rufus and I don't know. And this week's podcast is brought to you by Novig, which is the best predictive sports predictive market. Predictive
Sports prediction market.
sports prediction market. God, I really should be able to say that after how long they've been sponsoring us. If you want to go to novig.com and use the promo code BTP, it has the best pricing to bet the college basketball games. So I highly, highly, highly encourage you to go check it out. And with that, let's start the process. Welcome to another episode of the Bet the Process podcast, where Rufus is looking to see whether our guest has actually left or not, because he's still there. I can tell you're quizzical. I think he just hasn't gotten wiped from the screen yet, Rufus. Don't worry.
No, either that or he's the
It's
most
not like we're going to talk about
I've
anything
ever
that he
seen.
doesn't. It's like no, there's no like. This is not a
No, I
proprietary
know.
podcast.
There's
We don't have
nothing.
secrets.
Yeah, he'll
So
hear exactly what we say when if and when he listens to the
he probably
podcast.
doesn't even listen. Like I had to explain to him who we were, and he was still very
And,
unimpressed.
and,
So
and you did in typical Jeff fashion. You were like name dropping, and it was kind of amazing. You were like, yeah, like we have guests like Michael Lewis, Nate Silver, Shane Battier. Ken
we
Palm was on
we
last week.
we do. I
I,
mean, Ken
I, I threw
Palm
out Pablo Torre. Um,
ish. Pablo. Everyone's down on Pablo now because of his shock journalism.
Dude, he's such a great shock journalist, though.
Some
I
of
kind
our
of
friends that are at the NBA would not contend that his shock journalism is
well,
is the
oh,
best thing in the
yes,
world.
but they're not objective either.
I mean, who is objective in this day and age?
Nobody.
Yeah, everyone's got a bias.
Jeff, what was your favorite moment from week one of the NCAA tournament?
I mean, it was
Individual.
Alabama because I'm in a Calcutta where I all the number one and two seeds in this Calcutta went too high. This is the Calcutta where we can't use paper. I mean, we can't use computers. So I actually had the and there were fewer people involved. So I just had the pot underestimated.
Fewer
And then
paddles too, then. I love that you're saying fewer paddles.
well, they're paddles.
I know,
They
I know.
they
I
literally
like
there's
that. I
literally an
know. You
auctioneer
bid
and we
with
do
the
paddles. We lift
that's
paddles. Like it's a real
fucking old
it's in
school. I
person.
love
It's
it.
amazing. Anyway, so I so we had going into we did not spend a lot of money, which was good. And we had a lot of like, you know, 3 through 8 seeds or 10 seeds or whatever. We had Santa Clara, spoiler alert, but we also had Gonzaga, Louisville, Texas Tech. We got Texas Tech for so cheap it was insane. Sorry, not Texas Tech, Texas A&M. We got them for so cheap it was insane. But we also had UCLA and we had Alabama. And there's a couple really good junk bets. One is lowest overall score, sorry, lowest team score in any game. Another is most three pointers of one
Huh?
team in any game. Another is biggest blowout victim, obviously, and we had Prairie View, Texas A&M, or Prairie View, whatever they are, and they got biggest blowout. But anyway, so all this being said, the Alabama 3-point barrage and blowout because they were basically the last team we had of it. We had.
They
We're
are.
actually we're actually at now if everything falls like we think, like meaning they get most 3-pointers. They had 19 in that game, which will probably be hard to beat. Um, if all falls as we think, we'll probably lose about 20%. So if Alabama loses to Michigan, which probably will happen, we'll lose about 20%. But if Alabama beats Michigan, we're in some
You're in the money then.
we're in the money and also highest they'd be in a good reasonable position for highest seed in the Final Four and all this kind of stuff. Like so all of a sudden it becomes very interesting because they'll get to play an Iowa potentially an Iowa State team that's undermanned or Tennessee. And so they have a reasonable chance to go to the Final Four if they can beat Michigan, obviously. And then who knows, like 3-point variance, you gotta love it. How about you? What was your favorite moment?
My favorite moment was the end of that Santa Clara
Oh, come on. That was
we
my
had
least favorite moment.
We had Kentucky minus 3.5 and over on that game. And that ending was just, yeah, that sequence was pretty insane with, and I like that there were no stoppages in play because normally the last like 15 seconds of a game take like 15 minutes. But, you know, it was
It
two
was
points.
it was good. The overtime was bad, so I didn't love that. Like the overtime was just like kind of a blowout. And I had Santa Clara +3, so obviously that was painful. So you won, I lost. Um, it's pretty
That
much
was
a,
one of those moments though, because Jeff, we've lost, I believe on the season, we are down like over $1.5 million due to overtime swings, meaning games where had the where if overtime didn't exist, we would have won the bet, but we lost in overtime. Meaning like so, if we bet like a +3.5 that loses like Santa Clara in overtime, that's a negative overtime swing. Or if you had the under there, right?
I think I'm
So
familiar with negative under a
okay.
negative overtime
And,
swing.
and we were very balanced in terms of overs and unders for the year. I think it was something like 51-49%. So like you and in terms of favorites dogs, so you would expect to be about zero, but it seems like every year we get like we have we have bad luck on that. And so it was really nice to get like have it go our way in on two different bets on the same game. Although then the gods caught up to us and we lost three different totals by it felt I think it was three totals by the hook on Sunday.
Yeah, it's been a good tournament. I mean I think like the high point of it all that gives you like a little bit of fun, upset, and yeah, I mean it would be nice to see. Remember, we actually, by the way, I did seed the no vig no one seed. They posted that. We didn't get to have as much talking about it because obviously it didn't happen, like, but I asked Tony Kornheiser when I went on the show, I said, what do you think the chance of there being all number one seeds? And he was like, probably about 20%. And I was like, oh, no, not even close. I mean, obviously Tony Kornheiser is not a prognosticator or analytics guy, but I do think that is like, I think if you walked around and asked a lot of people what the chance would be, they would not be anywhere close to 4%.
The answer wasn't 4%, was it?
That's what Ken Palm said.
Okay. Um,
So you can argue with Ken Palm, but
well, I remember I did the math wrong. I remember at the beginning I was doing what the odds of no
yeah,
zero one seeds. But I think people overestimating that is the same reason people play money line parlays. They're like each number one seed is likely to win every game they play. So
right.
how is this not, somewhat likely to
Well,
happen?
there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I think it's a fascinating psychology experiment. There's obviously like availability heuristic or recency bias. There's narrative bias. I don't even know if that's a thing, but I now love that as a term, narrative bias, is narrative bias. But no, I mean, I think I actually landed in Illinois where I can use no vig, and that's where I put my seat. And I also bought some Purdue futures at that time, so maybe I'll become rich. Whoa, almost fell
Very
over.
nice.
Hopefully they get that in the outtakes because I just almost fell over my chair. Makes
Like,
we
don't you
probably
think that someone would rather take, like, if they had a choice between taking seven teams that like parlaying 7 90% favorites versus one even money, I think they would assume um, that the 7 90% favorites are more likely to but all win.
yeah,
I
probably.
bet there is some
Should we
psychology.
bet? Should we bet on people's psychology?
No, but you know what I mean?
Should
I
we
feel
try to
like
get Novig to put a market up on people's psychology?
why not? But do you know what I mean? I wonder what like how big that bias is in terms of what like how I mean like I bet that you could kind of quantify it and say okay you know and you know what maybe casinos have already done that,
Maybe.
because if you could figure that out you can better exploit it, which isn't something we want really casinos to be doing, but you know
That's psychology?
well that's what they do, that's what casinos do.
Really? I thought they were there to make people have people make money.
Some
I'm teaching
people.
my math class like I'm how to play blackjack right now, which is like third through fifth graders.
You
And
are such a bad
no, no. What's funny is like I
such a bad
worried
person.
that people's kids would like, but everyone comes back better at blackjack than they did the week before because they're playing at home with their parents, and their parents are actually playing with them.
Okay, this is. I was worried that some parents were gonna like report you to child services or something.
No, I mean, I actually do a lot of like real teaching in there, meaning like I'll like stop for a second and call out like what people are falling for, whether it's like a bias or something like that. And then, by the way,
Oh,
I
you're
have
the
this
bias guy.
new, what's that?
You're the bias guy.
I'm biased by bias. Yeah, I'm biased to talk about bias. I love talking about bias. I have a new. I was doing a speech for the Casualty Actuaries Society, and we were talking about
Of course you
failure.
are.
And my new line is like failure isn't binary, right? Like this idea that like failure is this binary thing, like failure is not binary, right? If failure is just a product of probabilities, meaning it's like one iterative step or one sample size thing, then you're like you don't think about failure as so almost like so it's not so deterministic or so bad. It's just like a step to getting to success.
Well, I think there's differences between a process failure and a failure.
A results failure.
Yeah.
Sure.
How do
Okay,
we
I like that.
distinguish like when results failed, but the process was good?
I like that.
What do we call that?
My process is never bad.
But then even if you have a bad process, if you learn from that, like then you can make the process better. I mean, that's basically what prediction market trading is. At least what I've been doing a lot and we've been doing a lot the last 6 months is like figuring out where what the weaknesses are in the process so we can make it better. And of course we're losing some on process, but we're winning in future process.
Are you going to give the people any more winners in college basketball if you're assuming you're down on all this stuff?
So I have one big one that
Well, don't spoiler alert, because we talk about it later.
yeah, but what about the people that are only listening for the big?
That's too bad. They got to listen to the whole thing.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Well, it is on the Illinois Houston game. I'll say that.
Okay. Do you have any other ones for the peeps?
I got to ask Taylor if he's okay with me giving out any of these too, but he
Hmm.
might be pissed.
All right. Well, I don't want Taylor to get pissed at you, so there you go. Um, Anywho, okay. Let's welcome in Gav to the Bet the Process podcast. He's a guy we found on Twitter who actually knows names of basketball players. So we figured we'd have someone on there. And yes, Rufus.
Oh, Taylor's getting back to me. So you're about to maybe have another pick. Nope. Never mind. You're not getting another pick.
All right. Sorry, guys. Real time disappointment.
You get one pick. That's like,
Let's welcome in Gav, and you'll get a pick. We now welcome in. We'll just call him Gav because that's what I know him as from Twitter on the to the Bet the Process podcast. The way I found you is that we normally have Jordan Majewski on this time to basically talk through matchups because Rufus and I our problem one of our many problems that we let's not just say we have one problem but one of our many problems is that we actually don't know the names of any players, especially Rufus knows like no names of players. And, he only knows actually in the NFL, he only knows old white quarterbacks like Andy Dalton, because that's like where his projections always show up well. So we need someone to come on college basketball. And you're following up. Ken Pomeroy is always our first guest for Sweet for the tournament. So you are now our second guest. And I noticed some of your write-ups for these Sweet 16 games, and personally was impressed with the thought process and whatnot. So that's a long-winded way of saying welcome to the podcast. And Gab, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself? You and I were talking a little bit off the air, how you got into this, what you're doing, and what you're trying to do with your world and career now.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate you guys having me on. Those are obviously some gargantuan shoes to fill. It's trying to be the guy playing shortstop for the Yankees after Jeter. But happy to be here and again appreciate you having me. But yeah, I mean, I come from the finance background, so a lot of my write-ups are going to be very, very heavy analytically based. It's always going to kind of be the tether that I keep or at least start all my handicapping process with. But I think kind of very much because a lot of, Jordan Majeski and what he's done. I mean, he is about as good as it gets in the business in terms of breaking these matchups down schematically. And yeah, he's obviously been influential in my process and, helping kind of guys around my age who bet similarly. So yeah, we'll kind of go towards the betting thing for, a couple months, see how it goes. And, we'll kind of go from there. But yeah, college hoops has always kind of been my jam. I just kind of casually bet really other sports like for fun and action. But yeah, college basketball has always kind of been my specialty, really.
And you said that your process this year has primarily been to cherry pick other models and use those to sort of understand and look for alpha. Where do you think you're getting your alpha from primarily then?
So I think there's kind of backing up. There's two ways to do it, right? Obviously, you make your own numbers, do your own model, play your own stuff, fully viable, understand and get that. I think the other way to do it is like if you have a thorough understanding of the databases like KenPom, like Bart Torvik, like shot quality, CBB analytics, you can basically find whatever stat you're looking for. How does this team fare against the rim, against this paint defense, or whatever the case may be, and just kind of trying to be a little bit more advanced with the numbers that you're looking at, rather than just basically handicapping a game from the KenPom page. So in an era where college basketball, and sports at large, we are kind of getting continually squeezed at the margins edgewise. A lot of kind of, what you were talking about with Jordan in terms of this matchup stuff and overlaying kind of matchup specific, schematic analysis on top of kind of a handicap can give us a little bit of that. And especially I think it's helpful during the tournament when you have a lot of times teams having not played each other coming in.
Do you read Jordan's stuff before you do a handicap and then sort of like, because Jordan stuff I think is deficient of like real analytics often. It's very like matchup and like how the game's going to be. Whereas what I notice is like you tend to bring in some other, models to justify sort of like some of the schematic stuff you're talking about. So like when you think about like a Jordan and how maybe you could improve his process, is it trying to take these, cherry picked kind of model stats that help illustrate the points that he's making?
Yeah, I think it can definitely help. I think the way that I think about it is like in financial statements. If one thing changes on the income statement, then it's going to flow through to the others, and there's going to be changes there. So KenPom, you can see, wow, this team has been really good defensively over the last 6 games or so. Okay, well, I want to go look at the 6-game 3-point splits that the team has had in that 6-game stretch. Oh, wow. They seem very unsustainable. There's a high 3-point percentage delta. Let me go to shot quality then to kind of reinforce how fortunate or unfortunate, or at least having a way to quantify some of the shot making from these games. And by that point, I've then backed into a pretty thorough full circle understanding of where I stand, with these teams in specific spots.
Are there any games that in the Sweet 16 that stick out to you where you think the line is incorrect?
I don't know if many lines are going to be incorrect in Sweet 16 games with the attention and the handle that is going to be, coming to these games. But, I thought part of me wants to say that the UConn line is wrong, but we're 35 games in, and I think kind of that UConn should be much better than they have been. Ship it has sailed, and they kind of are what they are at this point. I wouldn't say that any lines were just kind of outright wrong, couple points off from the jump. I understand why, like in Arkansas, took money. I have a feeling they're going to be a pretty trendy dog. Everybody kind of learning about Darius Acuff and, that high flying offense. So, I get why the money came in towards Arkansas, but I wouldn't even say that line's right, because I kind of more favor Arizona in the matchup specifically. So kind of the roundabout way of saying not really, don't really feel so personally.
Can you give me a reason to believe that Alabama can beat Michigan besides shoot a bunch of threes and make them?
Well, you just said it. I mean, that's the ultimate ace up the sleeve. Typically, the factors that you need to beat Michigan, Alabama really only has one of them, and that's the 3-point shooting. And there may be something to not having Aiden Holloway and having a bigger lineup to stand up, to more size defensively and rebounding. That also could be a very small 2 game sample where they ran out 2 teams that are basically the size of mid majors in Hofstra and Texas Tech without JT Toppin. So, that's going to kind of be put to the test here. The answer is yes, there is always a chance when you shoot 3-pointers at the highest rate in the country and you're facing a team that is not the greatest 3-point shooting team that last game aside, but highly improbable, I would say.
So so last year Alabama, it felt pretty similar, right? They came in off of a huge game where they shot a lot of threes and made them, and then played the overall number one seed and just got dusted. Is there any hope that this year is different, or is it probably the same scenario? It's like it's like Cinderella midnight. This is a different thing.
I tend to believe so. Last year, they got basically the best possible matchup in terms of a packed in BYU defensive scheme, followed by the worst possible matchup in a gigantic positional size Duke team. So that contributed to that kind of game over game disparity of how they look so great to how they look so poorly. It is similar here. We've had 2 instances of Bama playing teams who are as closely comparable to Michigan size as it gets in the country in Arizona, or excuse me, in Gonzaga and Florida. Gonzaga really kept them at arm's distance at players there, even with Bama shooting well. And that Florida just dismembering in the O-Dome was, a harrowing experience. They crushed Bama in the paint. So it's hard for me to point to that and say Bama has already played 2 similar teams this way, but I feel that they play completely different in this go around. It really just comes down to they're going to have to hit their 3-pointers because they're going to get slaughtered in shot volume.
I feel like a little better now that their like number one ball handler is not like a dwarf who can't get the ball up over. At least Philon's like 6'4" or whatever, 6'3.5", and I just have visions of Mark Sears dancing and dancing and dancing
You
and
even
not
like
being
Mark
able to.
Sears?
What's that?
I liked Mark Sears. He's a
I mean,
player
he's
whose
like
name I knew.
4'11", so it's like he was trying to like shoot over all those UConn guys. I mean, sorry, all those Duke guys, and it just didn't go well, right? And like they went last year as Mark Sears went to a certain degree, and I think at least this year, like Philon is just a better. I mean, he's I don't know if he's better than Mark Sears, but certainly he seems to be able to do more things than him. And I mean, he'll obviously play. He'll probably play in the NBA, whereas I don't think Sears is going to play in the NBA, right?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think so. Sears was an elite player, but obviously had his limitations at his size. I mean, Philon, I think the thing to commend him with is his year-over-year improvement in like the shooting department has been astounding, and really is what will kind of push him back, safely into the first round, probably top 20, maybe even kind of back end of lottery. Whereas it was much less the shooter last year, but. Yeah, there is a component where Aiden Holloway is an elite ball screen operator, both off the dribble, getting into the lane, paint touches, and kind of off the shot. So, Bama being a ball screen centric offense doesn't fare well, but it just means also more possessions for Philon, which I don't think is the end of the world at the end of the day.
Well, and having Reitzel in there, like you said, it just makes them play a little bit bigger, and so that's helpful against a team who's like what center is 7'3", and their three is like a 6'9" Adonis or whatever Yaxel is. So, anyways, all right, enough about that game. Uh, is Illinois the perfect kryptonite for Houston? Meaning they got all the Euros that play a different way against all the athleticism. Like, are we to believe that this is a bad matchup for Houston?
We are to believe that, in theory, on paper, this is about as bad of a matchup for the Houston defense as it gets. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen Kelvin Sampson defense come out connected and locked in, but that's the type of defense that could completely just wipe away any sort of, schematic advantage that you seem to have. But I mean, Illinois really has all the components that you need to beat Houston.
I mean, I watched the game last week, so yes, I have seen that happen.
Right. So that was more rhetorical, but I mean, the thing with Houston is they're going to put a ton of pressure on the ball, so you need multiple ball handlers capable of not coughing it up. Illinois is elite in preventing teams from turning them over. You need to keep Houston off the offensive glass. Illinois is the biggest team in the country and an elite two-way rebounding unit, and you need to have really good passers because doesn't matter who catches the ball, they're going to be seeing a double team in some form or fashion, whether in the post, off a ball screen, regardless. So, yeah, the way to beat them is skipping it to weak side shooters. They have above average passing bigs, maybe kind of bordering on elite. So there are many components that line up to Illinois could stand up better than many other opponents who Houston has kind of athletically overwhelmed in spots throughout the year.
Yeah. How
Jeff,
about this? Good.
you want me to give a rare bet the process college basketball pick?
Sure.
Our biggest bet of the week is Illinois. We
At
like
what price?
we took Illinois. We have them at a bunch of different prices, but it's very. I mean, it's very good at current market price +3. Like our fair is plus 0.3, basically. So we think the game should be close to a pick. Um, Houston should be minus 113 money line, basically.
We move lines on Bet the Process, Gav, so just be aware of that. If you want to bet Illinois right now, this is the
I bet
time to
it.
do it because it sounds like your schematic matchups match up with Rufus's numbers
And
and
we're
lack
I
of
can say this
knowledge
because
of
we're already
anyone on
down.
any team.
We're
What?
already down on it.
Yeah, so no, we can talk about it till the cows come home. No, but like when we talk about this stuff on Bet the Process, I bet this line will move. That's what I'm telling you. I bet this line ends lower than +3, which is what it's at right now.
I would kind of just
And
add that the final kicker is, the game is in Houston. So a lot of this, I think, comes down to kind of what you handicap, quote unquote, home court advantage. It's obviously not full throated for Tita Center in the middle of conference play, so you can't give them the full value there. But I do think it's actually still worth more than zero. I mean, we saw that Nebraska Vandy game was that crowd must have been 75% Nebraska. Like some of these teams, like Arizona is going to be doing the same thing in San Jose. Some of these teams are going to be playing basically quasi home games. So I think that is also an important component to it.
okay, what about this Nebraska Iowa game? Can we spare all the under and football game jokes? Is this like what I guess what I should say is it is what Iowa did to Florida. Is that real? Meaning, like, are they a much better team than was perceived at the beginning of the year? And how are we to think about this game in light of that game, or not even?
Yeah, it was funny because Iowa was one of these teams who really inflated their analytical rankings by just suffocating the low majors and pacing them by 30 points in 60 possession games. Um, Iowa has had problems playing up to competition this year, but then you look at the Florida result. That was very real. It was backed up by shot quality. I have no idea how they beat Florida on the glass. That was certainly not expected, but yeah, it is somewhat repeatable here. We've already seen these teams play twice. Both were slow pace, just absolute dogfights down to the very end. And with what Nebraska wants to do defensively in terms of hard hedging ball screens, auto doubling the post, denying the rim at all costs because they don't really have rim protection, it kind of sets up well for the Iowa offense. Ben McCollum, I think Ben McCollum, I'm glad that everybody kind of finally woke up after that Florida game because I think he's one of the maybe 10 to 15 best coaches in the country and probably like top 5 when you start talking in-game X's and O stuff. And Iowa's kind of whole shtick is everybody who's going out there can dribble, pass, and shoot. And, with the way that Iowa's going to bring some of the pressure, the way Nebraska's going to bring some of the pressure, Iowa certainly has routes out of it, whether via Sturts or kind of the other guys. So it does set up well for Iowa. I have a Nebraska plus 1900 win the region ticket in my pocket, and I'm quite worried in this matchup. I can't lie.
So you're worried. You're worried then about Iowa in this one.
Yeah, I'm worried. I'm worried Iowa definitely could win. I mean, you give Ben McCollum 3 looks at a team, and he's done decently well the first 2 times. I tend to trust that. And it's not that Fred Hoiberg's a bad coach. I mean, that Nebraska team to be able to play defense the way that they do, I mean, is the most connected defensive unit in the country because they play like Houston without the athletes of Houston. So, yeah, it is definitely a worry. This is the type of just greasy low possession. This may not get to 60 possessions, and there's just gonna be a ton of threes both ways with the way Nebraska plays. So plenty of variance involved, and it sets up well for Iowa.
All right, Texas plus 7.5, Purdue. Again, this is actually interesting, right? Of all these games that are the plus 7.5, plus 8, plus 9, we just talked about Michigan a lot. Let's say what's the next game in terms of which you would favor the favorite as a money line, meaning like, is this the next most certain outcome?
I tend to fall on Arizona for that.
Okay.
Um, because the issue with this is one, it's a high total for the 64 possession projection on KenPom, like high 140s. But it's rightfully so. I mean, both these teams' strengths of their offenses go right at the weaknesses of the other team's defense. Dallin Swain is probably the best ISO wing in the country, not named AJ DeBansa. And Purdue has just a gargantuan hole at the wing to the point where they have to like force Jack Benter minutes. So Tremont Mark also has his, streaks of peaks and valleys, although the peaks are really good and can carry an offense, and kind of similarly with Jordan Pope. So Texas has the ingredients offensively to score against Purdue. But the thing is, they're going to play drop coverage against Braden Smith. And so you're just at the mercy of, now that JT Toppin's hurt, TKR and Braden are probably the best two-man game in the country and have been doing it for 4 straight years. So, yeah, I think you get a ton of made shots. I want no part of an under in this when a bunch of shots are going in and you're just pulling your hair out even with the pace. But yeah, I think this is not as high of a floor outcome for Purdue as we might think, because they've gotten great 3-point shooting from their guards. CJ Cox is banged up coming in.
Is he going to play, or is he?
That's, who knows? With injuries kind of around March Madness, before the tournament, everybody was healthy and about to play because teams don't want to get docked on their seeding. But then the games actually start playing and they start saying, oh, maybe he's going to miss. So it's just one of those. It's just one of those things you got to wait till closer to tip. I mean, he's not going to alter the line all that much, just in a vacuum, especially with what's the replacement value on the Purdue team. Omer Mayer might even be better in some spots than CJ Cox. So yeah, it does set up well for Purdue. I mean, Texas is just hopeless away from the ball defensively, and if Painter wants to pull out his Mary Poppins bag of millions of sets and plays to run Lawyer through screens, you can probably have that if he wants to. So yeah, definitely sets up.
Lawyer was deadly in that and against Miami. So
yeah, and Miami gave him problems because they got up into Braden's jersey, they got physical with him. That's how we've seen the Purdue team struggle in their outs most years in the tournament. Texas is not going to do that whatsoever. So I do agree with you that it obviously is a good spot for Purdue, but it's not like, I don't think they're as easy of a path in this one as everyone might think.
All right, you mentioned Arkansas, Arizona. Let's talk a little bit about that one. That one you're saying is after Michigan. Would you say that that's more of a lock than Michigan, or the same?
I would say it's a greater probability to advance sheerly from the fact that Michigan is going to have to survive some 3-point volume discrepancy where they're going to lose the math ball, but Arkansas has a low 3-point rate. They're not good at forcing turnovers defensively. So right off the bat, they already don't really have like a great recipe to spurn upsets. And Arizona is probably the highest floor in the country. It's like the most complete team, 1 through 8. There's multiple NBA guys. There's multiple bigs. There's multiple guards who can defend and score. I've been under the impression it's the best team in the country basically since they lost the Texas Tech game. And I said, if that's how you have to beat Arizona, that's the best team in the country. And yeah, I think the main thing here is Arkansas is one of the worst teams at allowing opponents getting into the paint in the country. If you look at even like last 10 games, if you look at conference only, they are like dead last in points in the paint allowed per 100. And that is about as bad of a recipe as it gets against Arizona's size at the rim. They're going to run in transition. They're going to hammer the rim. And I just don't really know how Arkansas slows down that offense. Now, maybe Acuff, Malik Thomas, and Trevor Brazile are so good that they keep pace scoring wise. So I think if you like Arkansas, you have to think that it more probably shoots out if they're going to keep pace, because I just don't see Arizona slowing down in this one.
St. John's, Duke. Is this? What do we learn about Duke in the first week? Was the Siena thing indicative of a weakness, or and Can you confirm that John Shire is a bad X's and O's coach for me?
I cannot confirm that John Shire is a bad X's and O's coach to you. I think that this year, kind of with the way that UConn has played, Duke might be maybe alongside Purdue the best kind of half court execution team in the country with the way they play. But yeah, there are things to worry about from those first two games that you're gonna have to worry about in this spot. Duke just punted it away on a quarter of their possessions to like a tiny TCU team. And they're going to see very similar kind of up the line pressure from St. John's. They're going to switch a ton, and it doesn't really matter because you either have, one of the guards or you have Dylan Mitchell guarding you. Like, it's just, there's not really many great ways for Duke to alleviate their offense that has been very ball centric heavy without having Pat Ngongba back. Now, I think him back is massive for this matchup because it just gives Duke's offense another out. He can play the high-low game with Cam Boozer. They're both – Pat Ngongba is like 3-4 inches taller than the St. John's front line. So it's not unheard of that, they can have success in the high-low game. You can run guys off DHOs to initiate things with him. He just gives you much more offensive versatility compared to just slamming Caden Boozer ball screens without Caleb Foster in the lineup, which is what it looked a lot like and what the two teams had some success defending in the first two games. So, yeah, it's a tough matchup for Duke, but ultimately, like, they're not going to let St. John's run it all. They're one of the best transition denial teams under Shire annually. So, you turn the Johnnies into a half-court three-point shooting team, kind of like Kansas did in some respects, and you got a shot because if Bryce Hopkins didn't go 6 for 9, then St. John's might be sitting at home right now.
Michigan State giving two. You said you think this line is short, but maybe UConn is not what we thought they were, or how does the expression go? Like, they're not as good as I mean, they have elite talent,
Let
right?
him off the hook.
What's that?
Yeah, I mean, UConn has elite talent. 1 through 5. Terrace Reed's one of the best centers in the country. Braden Mullins is an NBA guy. Silas Demery is pretty good. Elite two-way point guard. Everything they have on paper is what they need. I mean, but this offense just has, for one reason or another, Dan Hurley has not been able to get this unit to click in the same ways that kind of the championship teams of UConn a couple of years back really did. So, yeah, they have all the shot making possible to make whatever run they want. And this matchup, I think, is much more favorable to the UConn side. And everything is kind of directionally pointing me towards UConn schematically. But like I said, brother, we're 35 games in or something to the season, and you can't just keep saying, "Oh, well, UConn still has it, but hasn't shown it," in stretches. It just is what it is at this point. There's kind of a little bit of the, Florida guards, are they ever going to come around conversation a couple months ago. So yeah, that's just kind of the one worry. But yeah, this would be probably UConn or past me. I think UConn is a lot more upside. If you tell me one of these teams wins by double digits, I think it's much more likely the UConn side. But yeah, Sparty's obviously plenty live. They're going to beat them up inside. And yeah, you could even go with kind of the puff piece narrative of obviously Izzo and March, although, Dan Hurley is plenty fine in his own regard.
And then finally, Tennessee, Iowa State. Is this they get Jackson back? This is right, Jackson. Jefferson? What's his name?
Josh Jefferson. I would be very surprised if he plays. And even if he does play, I cannot imagine he is anywhere near 100%. These kids these days can just, like I said, regenerate. I don't know how some of these guys come back from injuries as quick as they do, but I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying that it's very unlikely. And yeah, he's obviously crucial to Iowa State. You can get away with what Iowa State did against Kentucky without Josh Jefferson in terms of just kind of let Tamin Lipsey take the wheel and really drive the offense himself, whether creating or shooting. But this is a much tougher matchup. God, this is going to just be an absolute dogfight. So yeah, it's rough both ways. I obviously favor, kind of the Lipsey side over the Gillespie, given kind of the defense that Lipsey provides. Yeah, this is either under or pass for me, just with the defenses involved. Both these offenses have had pretty brutal stretches throughout different points of the year, whether game to game, half to half shooting. So that'd be the only place I look. And this is the type of game that you might want to wear catcher's gear while watching. It's going to be that type of rock'em sock'em affair.
All right,
I like
it.
those scrappy games.
What's your been your impression of the tournament so far? I mean, I think the narrative is obviously that we have, teams from only the major conferences left, and the level of basketball has been somewhat higher because of everything. What has your impression been?
Yeah, ultimately, when you factor kind of money and resources into the equation, all that does is push the haves further away from the haves not from the have nots. The guys who are good are gonna, look better than the average guy did before, and the people who can't figure it out won't. And so yeah, there is I get where people are coming from in terms of the lack of upsets, although I do think there's some kind of Pavlovian conditioning there from the media just beating us over the head about we have to have upsets every March, have to at the end of the day, what I want to see are the best teams playing at the end of the year. I don't know. Call me crazy. Like, last year, everybody had a cow over the 4-1 seats. Those are some of the best. Those are like three of the best games in the last couple of years in college basketball in terms of the Final Four and the finals. So, yeah, I'm more of the impression. Just give me the good games. I hope kind of the Iowa upset, kept a lot of those people at bay with, calling out the lack of upsets. But yeah, just give me the good teams playing at the end.
Okay, and who's the Final Four going to be, and who's going to be the champion?
So in my bracket, I have uh, Illinois, St. John's were kind of the non-one seeds I went. And then basically the first thing I did, I just advanced Michigan and Arizona right through. I don't think that they really see much resistance really at all kind of throughout the first couple rounds. Maybe Purdue makes it a little bit tough on I think the Zona bracket, but that's what I have. Would I exactly bet that right now? I don't know. If you let me redo it, I probably take like Duke, Illinois, and Michigan and Arizona if three of the one seeds are still alive.
Roof, and who's the champion?
I'm sticking with Arizona. It's not going to be the most contrarian take, but I just think most complete team 1 through 5, and all these coaches. They can't win in March right up until they win it. Todd Golden was the same way. Jay Wright had the same thing. Dan Hurley had the same thing. And this is Tommy Lloyd's go around.
I mean, he's only been a head coach for not that long. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that he's really
The
underperformed that
best
much.
talent evaluator in the sport, and it is not even close to a discussion who is number one.
Love it. Roof, you got any more questions for Gav?
I was going to ask if there were any surprises to you in terms of conferences that looked much better or worse than you expected going in, because when you've only had conference play for 2.5 months, we have all these narratives about how good the conferences are, but there's a lot of uncertainty there too.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that anything was too surprising. I mean, like if you look at just like Ken Palm net rating, I'm pretty sure SEC might have still been number one in terms of conference rank heading into the season, but that was more because of the depth that they had. There was always a piece of me kind of as Florida was just mowing these teams down one by one that like the SEC doesn't really have kind of the front courts that the Big 12 and the Big 10 do, and like even like a Duke out of the ACC. And there was just something in the back of my mind that said, like, they still have the two guards. Like, Florida just feels a little bit flimsier when they get out of conference play. And I didn't bet Iowa. I wish I had, but that kind of came to fruition. I think when you talk about conferences and stuff like that, you want to think about teams who have very unique styles, who play in a conference, especially like a symmetrical conference where you're getting 2 games against an opponent every year. Think like UConn in the Big East, right? Those coaches know exactly how to defend Hurley. They've faced him 6, 8, 10 times, depending on how long they've been at their stop. Um, but trying to guard all that stuff on a couple days prep with everything they do away from the ball is tough. Nebraska is another like very unique scheme where a lot of teams don't see defenses like that. The Big 12 the Big 10 is plenty familiar with them. And they do get a Big 10 opponent here. Coincidentally enough, that's funny, but like, so how do these teams fare once they get out of conference? I tend to want to be kind of buying on teams like that. That was some of my Nebraska rationale, at least for getting some of the future at the beginning of the tourney.
It's interesting, Jeff. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, we were talking about how the Big Ten always underperforms in the NCAA tournament, and that's kind of been turned on its head the last few years, hasn't it?
Well, you always like to talk about that. Whenever we have Ken Palm on, that's your question to him.
Well, that was back when, I mean, they had underperformed a ton over the past like decade before that, and then they've been good this year, and they've been the last few years they're very strong, and it always felt like the SEC was the conference where uh, that had the most upside in a way. Like,
How about the WCC, right? Because that was an
God,
interesting
now
one
you're
where
speaking my love language.
yeah, but like I feel like their underperformance was a lot of happenstance, meaning like
also
Santa
four
Clara should have
games.
won that game against Kentucky, and like they
Yeah,
got
that was an insane ending.
they got
Jeff,
kind of screwed, right? And then St. Mary's had a bad matchup with a team that just could turn them over and was athletic, and then
And came into the
oh,
game with illness running through their locker room too, playing
oh really?
St. Mary's was playing with
the most
illness.
ruthless press in the tourney.
And then Gonzaga obviously missing Huff and just, that last shot was insane. I mean, it was like, you're gonna give up one shot, a fadeaway three-pointer in the corner. I think that you're probably okay with that, right at the end of the shot clock. So,
That's all I really. I mean, you lose a guy. Not only do you lose just a player of Huff's caliber in a vacuum, but we've kind of seen the trend this year of what's really taken over the sport. These gigantic teams at the rim, these huge lineups. When you can defend the rim at an elite level, you can attack the rim and be efficient on offense. And you're more then really the only way, teams beat you is by out shooting you because you're going to be ahead in shot volume with the rebounding discrepancy. And you can put some pressure on teams, then yeah, that's kind of been the recipe for what these teams, and that was Gonzaga when they had Braden Huff. I mean, they could fight those teams with the double bigs. Their players era performance against Michigan aside, but yeah, they ran tough. I'll always defend the WCC. I love my West Coast mid majors, so yeah, I think they got a tough run of
do,
it.
do you think Santa Clara would have given Iowa State a better game?
Probably, I would like to think so. Like one thing that Clara does well is really get on the offensive glass, and that's kind of how you have to get to Iowa State, which is probably one thing I should have mentioned the Tennessee breakdown, given that Tennessee's the number one offensive rebounding team in the country for what seemed like 2 months. But yeah, I think they have a couple more ball handlers to kind of alleviate some of the pressure. They're a better three-point shooting team. They get on the glass. I tend to think that they would have fared better than Kentucky, but like I said, I'm obviously pretty biased.
Awesome. All right, Gav, thanks for joining us.
appreciate
Been
it.
great to get to know you, and hopefully can get you on college basketball some other time.
Yeah,
And
appreciate you guys having me. Thanks a lot.
to hear from somebody who knows ball.
I'm just a dude who likes watching hoops, who likes betting on it, and kind of drinking beers while doing the former too. So it's nothing out of the ordinary.
Love it.
Bet the process.